What would you do if a powerful millionaire lost everything in a single moment, and the only person who could save him was a little girl who didn't even know her own gift? In a room full of screens flashing system error, their worlds collided and nothing was ever the same again. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Everett Caldwell drove through the faded gold morning haze, the Hudson shimmering to his left like a sheet of brushed metal. It was a quiet hour, the kind older folks like to call the gentlest part of the day, though nothing felt gentle inside him. Months had passed since his company had been struck by the kind of digital ambush that sent markets trembling, and though the crisis had been contained, something in him had never quite settled. Success, he'd learned, could be loud, but guilt had a way of whispering at the edges of your mind. Today, he hoped, might be different. Hudson Yards rose ahead, all glass and steel, sharp against the pale sky. His driver pulled up to the entrance of Caldwell Dynamics, his empire, people called it. But as he stepped out, past the revolving doors and the polished marble floor, he felt that tug again, the one that reminded him that all his brilliance hadn't stopped some very real damage from happening months earlier. There were nights he still replayed the moment a child, a little girl of 8, no taller than his shoulder, had looked up from a glowing monitor and asked him quietly if he trusted her. He hadn't been able to answer then. He still wasn't sure he could answer now. The lobby was already busy. A barista from the lobby cafe waved at him. "Morning, Mr. Caldwell. Latte like usual?" Everett offered a faint nod. "Thank you, Claire. Yes, the usual." She placed the cup in his hand with that patient smile older generations always said New York no longer had. He appreciated it more than he let on. He stepped inside the elevator, the doors closing with a soft sigh. As he ascended, the city fell away, leaving only his reflection in the paneled wall, a man in his mid-40s with graying temples, crisp suit, and a look that gave away too many sleepless nights. He had built Caldwell Dynamics from nothing, coding in coffee shops and basement apartments, chasing a future he wasn't sure he'd ever reach. It wasn't the money that haunted him. It was the path how many people he'd ignored, how many bridges he'd let burn because ambition was easier than honesty. The elevator chimed softly at his floor. He stepped into his office, the kind with tall windows and a quiet that seemed borrowed rather than earned. On his desk sat a picture frame, turned slightly away from where he usually worked. He rarely looked at it now. It held an old photograph of his mother, her laugh frozen in time, her hand resting on his shoulder when he was still 12 and full of questions. She had cleaned houses in Queens, worked nights at a small grocery, saved every penny she could just to keep him moving forward. She never lived long enough to see what he built. Sometimes, he wasn't sure she'd recognize who he'd become. A soft knock pulled him back. His chief of staff, Rowan Myers, stepped inside carrying a stack of reports. "Morning, Everett. Today's numbers look strong. Markets opening steady." Everett nodded but didn't answer. Rowan studied him for a moment. "Rough night?" He attempted a smile. "Something like that." "Try to breathe a little today," she said gently. "You've earned at least that much." She slipped out, leaving him alone with the hum of the city. He sat at his desk, staring out at the river. Somewhere in Jersey City, just across the water, a girl named Aria Solis was probably eating breakfast with her parents before school. He hadn't seen her in weeks. Mateo had insisted on keeping her routine normal, and Everett had agreed it was the least he could do after everything she'd done. The child had saved his company, stopped a breach his entire cybersecurity division couldn't trace. And yet, he carried the same uneasy feeling every time he thought of her, that a gift like hers came with a weight far too heavy for small shoulders. He rubbed his temples. Maybe today would be quiet. Maybe the past would stay where it belonged, just for once. But the truth was, he had never been good at leaving things alone. And something in his bones, perhaps that whispering guilt, told him the quiet wouldn't last. He spent the rest of the morning drifting in and out of meetings, offering half-hearted nods while his thoughts wandered. Each presentation felt like a rehearsed echo of the last market growth. Development schedules, charts rising and falling like the tide. People spoke to him with respect, even admiration, but he felt none of it settle. Success had its own kind of loneliness, the kind that followed him into rooms crowded with people who depended on him. Near lunchtime, Everett stepped out for a breath of air. The building's terrace overlooked the river, a quieter pocket tucked behind tall planters, filled with fading autumn flowers. The wind picked up gently, carrying the scent of dry leaves and street vendors grilling hot pretzels down below. It was the sort of scent that older New Yorkers said reminded them of childhood ball games and fall carnivals, simple memories he wished he had more of. He stood at the railing, watching ferry boats slice through the water. Somewhere across that river, families were going about their ordinary days. Parents walking children to school. Couples sitting on their porches with warm mugs. People who still believed life moved in soft, predictable rhythms. He envied them more than he cared to admit. It wasn't that his life lacked meaning. It was the kind of meaning it carried big, heavy decisions that shaped markets and livelihoods. Some days, he wondered if he had traded too much humanity for ambition. His mother used to say, "Everett, a good man keeps his feet on the ground even when his dreams are in the sky." He wasn't sure when he had stopped following that advice. A buzz in his pocket pulled him back. A message from Rowan. "Mateo Solis returned your call from last week. He said Aria's doing well. No worries." He exhaled quietly. Good. The girl deserved peace. She deserved childhood, something he wasn't sure he ever truly had. She had stepped into danger to fix a mistake the world blamed him for, and yet she had walked away, offering him nothing but kindness. Children had a way of forgiving without being asked. Adults, he knew, could learn from that. As he turned to head back inside, he caught sight of something strange. The revolving doors at the far end of the terrace opened, and someone stepped out, a small figure, moving with a mix of hesitation and determination. Everett blinked. It wasn't an employee. Not a courier either. It was a child, no more than 10, wearing a faded lavender jacket and holding a small backpack to her chest like a shield. She looked around uncertainly before her eyes landed on him. There was something familiar about her, something in the careful way she walked, as though she didn't want to disturb the world around her. Everett straightened. "Are you lost?" he asked gently, keeping his voice soft, the way any adult might when speaking to a child who had wandered too far. She approached slowly, the wind catching her dark hair. Up close, he could see the nerves the kind children carried when they practiced bravery. Her hands tightened around the backpack straps, and she swallowed before speaking. "Sir," her voice trembled just enough to tug at something in his chest. "Are you Everett Caldwell?" The question hung in the autumn air, delicate and unexpected, an opening note in a song he hadn't realized was about to begin. Everett hadn't expected to hear his own name spoken with such trembling earnestness. The girl stood there, framed by the terrace's soft daylight, her eyes carrying a kind of quiet urgency. He nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "Yes, I'm Everett Caldwell. How can I help you, sweetheart?" he asked in that gentle tone older neighbors once used on him when he was a boy in Queens, wandering too far from home. The girl let out a small breath, as if confirming he really was who she hoped. She stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance, hands clasped before her. "My name is Aria Solis," she said, steadying her voice. I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're important, and this place—" her eyes flicked toward the tall glass buildings. "It's big. Bigger than I expected." Everett softened. She wasn't lost. She was purposeful, too purposeful for someone her age. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're not bothering me. Why are you here, Aria?" She opened her backpack and pulled out a small plastic folder, the kind schoolchildren used for homework. The corners were a little worn, the way things get when money is tight, but care is abundant. She held it out with both hands. "My dad said, if I ever felt unsure about something important, I should talk to the person who could actually help." She paused. "And I think that person is you." Everett's brows knit together. The folder felt oddly light in his grip. "What is it?" "Something strange happened on my tablet last night," Aria said, fidgeting with the zipper of her jacket. "I didn't know if it meant trouble or if it was nothing. But when Mama saw it, she told me she didn't understand computers and Daddy works late, and then I thought—" She hesitated. "You're the only person I know who knows about big computer things." There was something disarming about her honesty. No theatrics, no fear, just the thoughtful calm of a child raised to be cautious and kind in equal measure. He opened the folder. Inside was a printout of a message captured from a screen, a string of numbers, a glitchy symbol, and a line that read, Unknown system attempted access at 2:17 a.m. Everett felt a small chill crawl up his spine. He tried to hide it. Where did this come from? My tablet, she answered simply. It's old. Dad found it at a yard sale last year. Sometimes it freezes, so I thought maybe it was just sick. She looked up at him hopefully. If something bad tries to find me again, will you still help me? He didn't need to think. Yes, Arya. I will. The elevator doors slid open, and as they stepped inside, a thought flickered in the back of Everett's mind. Quiet, uneasy, persistent. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The next morning arrived with a soft gray sky stretching over New York, the kind of muted light that made the city's edges look gentler than they usually did. The front desk lady asked me if I was visiting a parent. I said no. Then she asked if I was sure I was in the right building. I told her I wasn't sure of anything today. A tiny shrug. She looked worried and let me ride the elevator. Everett exhaled through a quiet, incredulous smile. Of course, someone had helped her. Despite the city's reputation, New Yorkers still had that streak of protectiveness, especially towards small, nervous children carrying beat-up backpacks. So this message appeared last night? He asked. Arya nodded. And then again this morning. I tried turning it off, but it blinked at me like it was confused. She hesitated. I know I shouldn't mess with things I don't understand. Everett turned the printout over. The code fragments. Something about them tugged at a memory he'd tried hard to bury. Something from the attack months ago. Something he'd hoped was long gone. He straightened. You did the right thing coming here. Arya shifted her weight. Dad doesn't know I left. He's cleaning at the pier today. I thought I'd be back before he noticed. She bit her lip. I just didn't want anything bad to happen because of me. The simplicity of that fear, gentle, earnest, settled heavily on him. Nothing bad is going to happen because of you, Everett said, kneeling slightly so he was eye level with her. You're safe, and you're not in any trouble, I promise. She let out a shaky breath of relief. He rose again, looking out toward the river as a ferry cut across its surface. Whatever had found its way onto her tablet, it wasn't accidental. It wasn't random, and it wasn't small. But he couldn't tell her that. Not yet. All right, he said, turning back to her. Let's take a look together. And for the first time that morning, the quiet inside him shifted less like loneliness and more like the echo of a door gently opening. Everett guided Arya back inside the building, choosing the quieter service elevator instead of the main one. He didn't want her overwhelmed by the noise or the curious eyes of employees rushing to lunch. As the elevator rose, the girl held her backpack close, her fingers tapping nervously against the fabric. Everett spoke softly, the way someone might calm a stray bird perched on their windowsill. You said the message showed up twice? He asked. She nodded. Yes, sir. Last night around 2. Then again when I woke up. Her voice dropped. I don't stay up late. Mama says it's bad for little ones. Everett offered a small smile. Your mother sounds wise. She is, Arya whispered, eyes following the elevator's glowing numbers as they climbed. She says when something scares you, you should tell someone you trust, even if it's hard. He looked at her carefully. And you trust me? Arya hesitated, but just for a moment. Yes, you helped me when no one else could. Daddy said you didn't have to, but you did. The elevator chimed and opened into a quieter hallway that led toward the small tech room adjacent to his office, an improvised calm corner, as Rowan jokingly called it. It held couches, warm lamps, and a few old devices Everett tinkered with in rare moments of quiet. He motioned for her to sit on the soft green couch while he took a chair across from her. May I see the tablet? He asked gently. She handed it over without hesitation. The device was old edges scuffed, a tiny crack near the camera, and it powered on with the sluggishness of something long past its prime. Yet the moment the home screen appeared, Everett saw it, a faint flicker in the corner, like a breath caught between one thought and the next. He tapped the notifications. The strange message reappeared. Unknown system attempted access. Then an icon flashed, too fast to comprehend. Arya leaned forward anxiously, her feet dangling above the floor. Is it bad? Everett didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed, following the quick pulse of code beneath the screen's surface. It wasn't malware. It wasn't a bug. It was something far more precise. Something that didn't belong in a child's hand, me-down tablet. I don't want to scare you, he said softly, but I think someone tried to send a signal through this device. Arya's hands clasped tightly together. Because of what happened before, she whispered. She remembered more than he expected. Possibly, he admitted. But that's not your fault. She exhaled shakily.
Daddy says I'm too young to worry about grown-up problems. But it still feels like the grown-up problems keep finding me.
There was a truth in that sentence that hit harder than it should have. Children often felt the ripple of circumstances they never created. Everett set the tablet on the table and spoke with a warm steadiness. You didn't cause this, and you're not alone with it anymore. He paused. Once I figure out what this is, we'll make sure you're safe. Arya looked relieved, but also thoughtful, her brows pulling together the way they did when she solved puzzles.
Could it be the same people who tried to break your computers before?
She asked carefully. He wasn't surprised she'd made the connection. Her mind worked quickly, quietly. I don't know yet, he answered honestly. But I'll find out. Outside, the afternoon sun settled lower, painting the office window with that warm, amber glow older folks like to call porch light hour. A time when families were cooking dinner, when neighbors waved across fences, when the world felt small and reachable. Everett wished he could wrap Arya in that same warmth, something steady, something she deserved. She glanced at the door. Do I have to tell my parents I came here? You don't have to do anything right now, Everett said, soft but firm. I'll call your father and let him know you're safe. You won't get in trouble. Her shoulders eased, just slightly. He powered off the tablet, slipped it into its folder, and stood. Come on, I'll walk you downstairs. She rose and followed him, her steps small but certain. As they reached the elevator again, she tugged gently on his sleeve. Mr. Caldwell? She asked. Yes? Her eyes lifted to his with a solemn honesty that made him pause. And you're not alone with it anymore, he paused. Once I figure out what this is, we'll make sure you're safe. Arya looked relieved, but also thoughtful, her brows pulling together the way they did when she solved puzzles.
Could it be the same people who tried to break your computers before?
She asked carefully. He wasn't surprised she'd made the connection. Her mind worked quickly, quietly. I don't know yet, he answered honestly. But I'll find out. Everett arrived early, long before the building filled with footsteps and conversations. He preferred these quiet hours. They reminded him of the mornings when his mother used to brew weak coffee in their tiny queen's kitchen, humming low to herself as the world slowly woke. But today, his peace didn't hold. On his desk, beneath a stack of reports from the night shift, lay Arya's tablet tucked neatly in its folder. He hadn't stopped thinking about it since she'd left the day before. But then I remembered, computers aren't supposed to talk to places they don't know. Despite himself, Everett smiled faintly. No, they're not. The wind rustled through the terrace planters, and for a moment, Everett forgot the weight of markets and mergers. He saw only a child who had somehow wandered into his morning with a piece of a puzzle he didn't know he was missing. Arya, he said softly, how did you even manage to get up here? Oh, she said, cheeks coloring. He didn't want Arya pulled into anything more dangerous than she already had been. A child deserved calm mornings, school bus chatter, crayons, and lunchboxes, not code fragments trying to reach her in the middle of the night. He rubbed his forehead. He needed help, but help he could trust. The list was short. A knock sounded. Rowan peeked in, a travel mug in hand. Morning. You're in early. I couldn't sleep, Everett said. She glanced at the tablet on his desk, then at the look in his eyes. This is about the girl, isn't it? It is, he admitted. Rowan stepped inside, pulling the door closed. Everett, you're carrying that weight again. Just tell me what's going on. He handed her the folder. Her device caught a signal. Twice. Maybe more. And it's not random. It looks like someone probing for a weak point. Rowan's expression sobered as she studied the printout. This symbol, I've seen it before. Right after the breach, she placed the paper down carefully. Do you think it's starting again? I don't know, Everett said quietly. But it's reaching into a child's tablet. That's deliberate. Rowan let out a slow breath. Then whoever did this isn't finished. He didn't respond. The truth was, he feared the same thing, feared that the shadow of his company's past mistakes had stretched further than he'd realized. He had been trying so hard to rebuild, to set things right, but some ghost didn't stay buried. Rowan set the folder down gently. "What do you plan to do?" "Find out what this is," he said, "and keep Arya out of harm's way." Rowan nodded, her concern softened by that familiar steadiness she always carried. "All right. If you're going down this road again, you're not doing it alone." Everett offered a faint smile, grateful for her loyalty. He glanced toward the window where the early light shimmered across the river. Somewhere in Jersey City, Arya was probably packing her lunch or tying her shoes while her parents urged her not to miss the bus. He wished he could stay in that safe, ordinary world a little longer. But life rarely asked permission before complicating itself. His phone buzzed softly. A message from an unknown number. "We see you." The 3 words appeared, then vanished before his eyes, as if swallowed by the screen. A cold prickle crawled down his spine. He opened his contacts, tapping one name he had avoided for months. Carson Hale, the former intelligence strategist who had once called him brilliant and reckless in the same breath. If something dangerous was beginning again, Everett needed someone who understood danger. He hit call. As the line rang, he glanced down at the small lavender folder on his desk. Arya had no idea what she had stepped into, and he intended to keep it that way. Carson answered on the 4th ring, his voice rough with sleep, and something that always sounded like ex-military caution. "Caldwell? Didn't expect to hear from you." "I need your eyes on something," Everett said quietly, keeping his tone calm, even as unease curled beneath it. "It's important," Carson grunted. "You usually call when the world's on fire. Should I grab a bucket or a brigade?" "Just come," Everett replied, "and keep this off your records." There was a pause, then a sigh that carried old fatigue. "All right, I'm on my way." When the call ended, Everett set the phone down and took a long breath. Trust was a fragile currency in his world, one he didn't spend lightly. Carson had been a friend once, before ambition and secrecy drew lines they didn't know how to cross. But if there was someone who could recognize the shape of a threat hidden inside a few seconds of corrupted code, it was him. By mid-morning, Carson stepped into the office wearing a weathered jacket, the kind that still held the faint smell of engine oil and winter wind. His sharp eyes scanned the room before settling on Everett. "You look worse than last time." "Good to see you too," Everett murmured, handing him the folder. Carson examined the printout, then powered on the tablet. The glitch pulsed again, faint but deliberate. Carson's expression hardened. This isn't amateur. Whoever did this knew exactly how to mask a ping, and they wanted someone to notice. "Someone like her?" Everett asked. Carson lifted his gaze. "Someone connected to you." Everett felt the truth of those words sit heavily in his chest. Someone wasn't poking at random devices. They were reaching for him through a child. Carson crouched near the small side table, connecting a portable analyzer from his jacket pocket. "Let's see what we're dealing with. If this is what I think it is, you've got a ghost crawling through your digital walls again." Everett leaned against the edge of the couch, arms crossed. "I just want her safe." Carson didn't look up. "Kids shouldn't be anywhere near this mess. Whoever's doing this, they don't play clean. That's what worries me." Carson tapped a command. A thin, wavering line of code scrolled across the analyzer screen, then split, fracturing into symbols no ordinary system would generate. Carson froze. "You've got to be kidding me." "What?" Everett stepped closer. "This pattern, I've seen it before." Carson's voice dropped. "It matches the signature from the attack months ago, but it's changed, refined. Someone rebuilt the engine and tested it on a low-security device so you wouldn't see the first move." Everett's jaw tightened. "Why a child's tablet?" "Because it's unpredictable," Carson said. "Old hardware, inconsistent firewalls, and anyone monitoring your systems would never think to check something that innocent." A bitter silence settled between them. "So they're watching?" Everett asked. "Not watching." Carson unplugged the analyzer. "They're looking, and now they know you're aware." Everett stared at the small tablet resting on the cushion. A child's device. A child's life. And somehow, someone had chosen that vulnerable place to begin again. "How do we stop it?" he asked quietly. Carson stood, pulling on his jacket. "First, you keep the girl close. Second, you let me dig until I find the root. Third," his tone darkened, "you brace yourself. Because this time, they're not hiding in your systems. They're walking toward you. End of 20. Everett felt the room shift around him, the weight of the moment settling like dust in an old attic, quiet, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Then Carson added, "And Everett? Whoever did this? They know exactly where to hit you now." The words lingered as Carson left, and Everett stood alone, the river glittering far below like a warning dressed in sunlight. He glanced once more at the lavender tablet folder. Whatever was beginning had already crossed the threshold. Everett spent the afternoon in a fog of restless thought, pacing the length of his office as the city carried on below him with its usual, indifferent rhythm. Taxi horns, ferry horns, the murmur of people going about their days, all of it felt strangely distant, as though he were listening from another world. He kept replaying Carson's words. They're looking, and they know. He didn't want to drag Arya into anything more. The child had already endured far too much for someone who should be thinking about spelling quizzes and playground rules, not encrypted signals and unknown threats. Yet fate, or something that felt uncomfortably like it, had pulled her back in. His phone buzzed with 2 urgent notifications, then another. He ignored them, letting the device vibrate against his desk until it fell silent again. Work could wait. Numbers could wait. The board could wait. Everything could wait except understanding why danger was inching its way toward a little girl who deserved none of it. As the hours passed, a new thought began pressing into him, one he hadn't let himself consider fully. If someone was using Arya's tablet to pierce a hidden channel, it meant that whoever orchestrated the original breach had never truly stepped away. They had simply gone quiet, gathering information, shaping something in the shadows. He reached for the tablet folder again, running his finger over the worn plastic. It felt fragile, like a small remnant of a world that should never intersect with his. That a threat this calculated had touched something that belonged to a child made his chest tighten with an anger he didn't quite recognize in himself. Near 5 o'clock, Rowan returned, leaning against the doorway with a weary look that told him she knew he hadn't eaten.
"You missed lunch again," she said.
"That makes 3 days in a row." "I'll eat later," he replied, though they both knew he probably wouldn't. Rowan stepped inside, moving with the calm authority of someone who had stood beside him through public scrutiny, late-night crises, and the aftermath of the company's worst mistakes. "Everett, you can't fix everything alone." He shook his head.
"It's not everything. It's her."
Rowan softened at the mention.
"She's just a child, but she trusts you."
"Which means you owe her safety, not secrecy." He knew she was right, but the truth pressed heavy on him. "If I tell her family too much, it'll send them running. And if I keep too much to myself, I risk letting something slip through." Rowan approached the window, gazing out across the river. "Maybe the right answer is somewhere in the middle," she said gently. "Her father deserves to know a little. Not everything, just enough to keep her protected." Everett rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I'll talk to him soon." "Soon," Rowan repeated, unconvinced but unwilling to push. For a long moment, the room fell quiet, except for the hum of the HVAC and the faint rush of traffic from below. The kind of quiet that made older folks remember the stillness of Sunday afternoons in their childhood towns, where windows were cracked open and everyone trusted the world a little more. Then Rowan turned toward him. "Everett, earlier today security flagged something on the visitor logs." She hesitated. "Someone asked for you by name." He looked up sharply. "Who?" Rowan shook her head. "No ID. No appointment. They left before we reached them." But they looked around the lobby long enough to make people uneasy. A cold knot tightened in his stomach. "Did they say anything?" "One sentence," she replied. "They told the guard they wanted to finish what they started." He stood still, the words sinking heavy into the air. Rowan stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Whatever this is, it's not going away. And it's circling closer." Everett faced the window once more, the late-day sun casting a pale gold over the water. He could almost imagine the small apartment in Jersey City where Arya lived, a place filled with warmth, small comforts, and the kind of hope-working families carried like a lantern through long winters. She didn't know the storm was gathering again, and he wouldn't allow it to touch her. He picked up the tablet, gripping it more firmly this time. "I'll need Carson back tomorrow," he said quietly. "We're not waiting for whoever this is to make the next move." Rowan nodded, her worry silent but palpable. As she left, Everett felt the room settle around him with a weight that made even the ticking of the distant hallway clock feel louder. Somewhere in the city, a threat was taking shape. and it had already found the door to a child's world. The evening deepened slowly, the sky bleeding into indigo as office bulbs glowed one by one across the Hudson Yards skyline. Everett remained in his chair long after the sun slipped away, hands steepled beneath his chin. Outside, the river reflected streaks of yellow and silver, and the city hummed with its familiar chorus, ferries docking, traffic rolling, voices drifting like distant echoes. But beneath that ordinary noise, Everett felt something else, a faint, steady pressure, like the air right before a storm front. He finally rose, unable to sit still any longer. The tablet lay on the table, silent and unimposing. You wouldn't know by looking at it that someone had used it as a doorway, someone who wanted him rattled, someone who had chosen the smallest, most innocent point of entry to make the biggest statement. He crossed the room, turning on a small lamp near the bookshelf. Warm light spilled across the old wooden surface where his mother's recipe cards sat tucked between framed photos. She had once told him that good people weren't made by power or accolades, they were made by how they treated the vulnerable. He hadn't understood her lesson back then. Now, it rang louder than anything the city could shout. A soft knock drew his attention. His security director, Dana Whitmore, stepped inside. She was steady, in the way lifelong service members tended to be posture straight, eyes alert, voice calm, even when the news wasn't. "Sir," she said, closing the door behind her, "I thought you should see this." She handed him a printout of the day's security footage stills. One image froze him, a blurry figure near the revolving doors, standing just far enough away that the face couldn't be captured clearly. But the stance, the angle of the shoulders, the deliberate distance kept from the main flow of foot traffic told Everett everything he needed. This was no lost visitor. "What did the guard say?" he asked. Dana folded her hands calmly. The individual didn't act hostile. They didn't try to enter restricted areas. But they watched. They observed the patterns of people coming in and out. And when asked if they needed assistance, they simply said, "I'm finishing what I started." After that, they walked out. Everett felt the room tilt, not physically, but in the way moments sometimes carried the weight of something larger than themselves. "Were they following anyone?" "Not that we could confirm," Dana replied. "But they looked up toward your office windows before leaving." He swallowed, the gesture feeling heavier than it should. "Increased surveillance. Double staff rotations. No one gets through without proper vetting." "Already in motion?" Dana assured him. She hesitated just a moment. "Sir, is this connected to the girl?" Everett's silence answered for him. Dana nodded once, understanding more than he said. After she left, Everett moved to the window again. Across the river, Jersey City lights flickered like small constellations. Somewhere among them, a young girl was brushing her teeth, packing her school folder, maybe humming a tune her mother liked to sing while cooking. He pictured Arya's thoughtful eyes, her careful posture, the bravery she wore without realizing. He couldn't bring this darkness anywhere near her life. His phone buzzed again, another message from an unknown number. This time, it didn't disappear. The signal opened. "The door is not closed." A cold ripple threaded down his spine. He grabbed the tablet, powered it on, and watched the screen light up with an unnatural shimmer. A symbol flashed, one he hadn't seen since the breach months ago. Something like an eye, broken through the middle. Then the screen went blank. No message. No warning. Just silence. Everett stared at the black display, jaw tightening. Whoever was doing this had escalated. This wasn't probing anymore. This was communication, a direct line. And the tablet, once harmless, now felt like a ticking clock in his hands. He set it down carefully, as if it might shatter from more than touch. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over the distant sky. A storm was coming. And it wasn't only about code or access points. It was about a child, a family, a past mistake that had not forgiven him yet. Everett took one steadying breath, then another. The path ahead was no longer a question. He would face whatever this was, and he would keep Arya safe no matter what lines he'd have to cross to do it. Because someone had whispered a threat into the smallest corners of her world. And he intended to answer. Everett drove across the river early the next morning, long before most of Jersey City had shaken off its sleep. The sky hung low and cloudy, with that pale winter blue tint that made neighborhoods look softer, quieter. He didn't blast music or listen to news updates, just let the hum of the engine settle his nerves. He had barely slept, mind circling the same point. Arya's world had been touched by something that should never have entered it. He turned onto a narrow street lined with older brick apartments. Small porch lights still glowing from overnight. Families here woke early cleaners, delivery drivers, nurses, people carrying the country on shoulders that rarely complained. Everett parked near the Solis building and sat there a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, unsure how to start a conversation no parent should ever have to hear. When he stepped out, the familiar scent of morning brewed coffee drifting from open windows, laundry detergent from someone doing chores early met him with a surprising warmth. It was the kind of neighborhood his mother would have loved. Safe, hardworking, honest. As he approached the stoop, the front door swung open, and Matteo Solis stepped outside, keys in hand, backpack slung over his shoulder from a night shift. His eyes widened when he saw Everett. "Mr. Caldwell? Everything all right?" Everett offered a gentle nod. "Morning, Matteo. I didn't mean to worry you. I was hoping we could talk." Matteo straightened, sensing something beneath the politeness. He was a man whose instincts had been sharpened by years of protecting his family while working jobs that offered little certainty. "Is this about Arya?" he asked quietly. Everett swallowed. "Yes. She's fine, I promise. She's safe. But something came up yesterday, and I think you should know." Matteo's jaw tightened, worry creeping into his expression. "Come in," he said immediately. Inside, the Solis apartment carried the warmth of a home held together by love more than money. A small dining table with mismatched chairs, cereal bowls stacked to one side, a drawing taped proudly to the fridge, Arya's handwriting in purple marker spelling her name with a little star beside it. Everett felt something in him soften and ache at the same time. Elena appeared from the hallway, tying her hair back. "Everett, is Arya okay?" There was tremor under her voice, the kind only mothers carried. "She's all right," he said gently. "Truly, she's probably still sleeping. I just needed to speak with you both." They sat at the table, sunlight stretching through the thin curtains. Everett placed the tablet folder down, careful and slow, like one might set down something that didn't belong in a kitchen filled with homemade comfort. "Yesterday," he began, "Arya brought this to me. She saw something unusual on her device, and given what happened months ago, she worried." Matteo rubbed his palms together. "She said she had homework issues. She didn't say anything about this." Elena looked at the folder, as if it were a sleeping animal that might wake if she breathed too hard. "What does it mean?" Everett paused, choosing his words with the gentleness of someone aware he could bruise without intending to. Someone tried to connect to her tablet. It wasn't random, it wasn't dangerous in that moment, but it wasn't normal either. Elena covered her mouth, eyes growing glossy. "Why our daughter?" Everett lowered his voice. "Because someone is trying to get to me." Silence wrapped the room in something heavy, something that made even the soft ticking of the wall clock feel louder. Matteo leaned forward. "So this is about your company? Something from before?" "Yes," Everett admitted. "And I'm so sorry it touched your family in any way. I wish it hadn't. But I promise you, your daughter didn't do anything wrong. She didn't invite this. She didn't cause this. She's just a child caught in the path of something I thought I had buried." Elena wiped her eyes, steadying herself. "Is she in danger?" "No," Everett said firmly, meeting her gaze. "Not as long as I'm here. Not as long as I know what's happening. That's why I came." Matteo exhaled, shoulders lowering slightly, not in relief, but in acceptance. "So, what happens next?" "I'll handle it," Everett said softly. "But I need to watch the connection for a few days. I'd like to keep her tablet with me," he added, "and give her a safe replacement in the meantime." Elena nodded slowly, still shaken. "She trusts you, Everett. Maybe more than she trusts anyone else about whatever this is." He felt the weight of those words settle deep inside him. Before he could respond, a door creaked open down the hall. Small footsteps padded across the floor. Arya appeared, hair tousled from sleep, rubbing one eye with the back of her hand. "Dad? Mama?" She blinked at Everett. "Mr. Caldwell, why are you here?" Everett smiled gently. "Morning, Arya." She walked toward the table. worried for reasons she didn't understand.
Did I do something wrong?
No, sweetheart, Everett said softly.
You did everything right.
And though she didn't yet know why, the reassurance made her shoulders ease just a little. Arya stood there in her soft pajamas, the kind with tiny yellow stars printed along the sleeves, blinking up at the adults as if trying to read a language no one had taught her yet. Elena brushed the girl's hair gently, guiding her toward a chair beside her. The morning light framed her small form, and Everett couldn't shake the feeling that she looked far too young to be involved in anything even remotely close to danger. "Mr. Caldwell came to check on you," Elena said softly. "He wanted to make sure everything's okay." Arya's eyes widened. "Is it because of the tablet?" Everett offered a warm smile. "Yes, sweetheart. I needed to look into it more." She fidgeted with the hem of her pajama sleeve. "I didn't mean to make trouble. Mateo exhaled, shoulders lowering slightly, not in relief, but in acceptance. "So, what happens next?" "I'll handle it," Everett said softly. "But I need to watch the connection for a few days. I'd like to keep her tablet with me," he added, "and give her a safe replacement in the meantime." Elena nodded slowly, still shaken. "She trusts you, Everett. Maybe more than she trusts anyone else about whatever this is." He felt the weight of those words settle deep inside him. You didn't," he assured her gently. "You were brave to show it to me." Mateo watched the exchange with a mixture of worry and gratitude. He wasn't a man who trusted easily. Life had taught him to be cautious with people who held power, but he trusted the sincerity in Everett's eyes. "She has school in an hour," he said. "If there's anything else we should know, tell us." "There's nothing immediate to fear," Everett replied honestly. "But I want you both to stay alert for the next few days. Is that mine?" "It is," Everett said with a soft nod. "Just until I finish looking at your old one. This one's safer. Think of it as your superhero version." Her face brightened a little. "Does that mean it has powers?" "It has something better," Everett said warmly. "It keeps you safe." Arya hugged the backpack to her chest with a tiny, relieved smile. Elena pressed her lips together, touched by the gesture. But Mateo leaned forward, voice low. "Everett, are you putting her in the middle of something?" "No," Everett said, steady and certain. "I'm taking her out of it." A quiet understanding passed between them. They didn't have the luxury of knowing the full story, not yet, but they recognized sincerity when they heard it. And Everett carried no fear in his voice, only responsibility. Arya slid off her chair and padded toward her room. "I'm gonna get dressed," she announced softly. "We have art today. We're painting winter trees." When she disappeared down the hall, Elena finally let out a shaky breath. "She doesn't need burdens, Everett. She's already such a sensitive child." "I know," he answered, "and I intend to protect that sensitivity." Mateo's gaze sharpened. "Do you really think someone is after you? Enough to reach into my daughter's tablet?" Everett hesitated, but only for a second. "Yes," he said quietly, "and I think this was only the first move." Silence settled like dust between them. After a few minutes, Arya returned wearing a warm jacket and jeans, her hair neatly brushed. She carried her backpack and looked up at Everett timidly. "Will you come to school sometime? Not for a bad reason, just to visit?" His chest tightened unexpectedly. "If your parents say yes, then of course I will." She smiled, shy but hopeful, the kind of smile that made something inside him settle, if only for a moment. Mateo walked them to the door. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice softer now. "Most people in your position wouldn't drive across the river over a child's tablet." Everett shook his head. "Most people haven't met your daughter." Mateo's eyes warmed, gratitude shining through the exhaustion of long shifts and tight budgets. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Caldwell." "I will," Everett promised, "and I'll keep you updated. You're not alone in this." Arya stepped onto the stoop, sunlight catching the ends of her hair. She waved. "Bye, Mr. Caldwell." "Bye, sweetheart," he replied, raising a hand. As Everett walked back to his car, he felt the weight of the city again. The buzzing streets, the old fire escapes, the winter wind carrying smells of breakfast diners and bus exhaust. Everything felt sharper now, as though danger had colored the world in darker shades. He opened the car door but paused, looking back at the building one more time. Something inside him whispered the truth he'd been avoiding. Whatever was coming had already chosen its path. and he was now firmly standing in its way. The next morning arrived with a thin layer of frost stretched across the sidewalks of Tribeca, glittering faintly beneath the early Sunday. Everett stood at his kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone lukewarm. Sleep had been scarce. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Arya's uncertain smile, the cracked yellow tablet in his hand, and the lines of code Carson had traced back to something neither of them could fully identify. By 7:30, Carson arrived at the penthouse, scarf askew, hair still damp from the shower. "You look terrible," he said, tossing his bag on the table, "which is reassuring because it means you've been thinking." "Thinking," Everett muttered, "is an understatement." They moved to the office space floor to ceiling windows looking over the slow morning traffic, a sky still pale with the promise of winter. Carson slid into the chair beside the new workstation where Arya's tablet code had been running diagnostics overnight. He tapped a few keys. Same pattern as last night. Whatever planted, this wasn't trying to steal bank accounts. This was reconnaissance. Everett leaned in. "Meaning?" Someone wanted to see what she accessed. What apps she opened, what she typed. Basic behavior logging. Carson paused, brows knitting. "But the strange part is how clean the structure is. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, yet didn't leave a signature." Everett felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Could it be targeted at me?" "Maybe." Carson hesitated. "Or maybe not." Everett straightened. "What do you mean, maybe not?" Carson turned his chair, facing him fully. "Everett, there's a chance this wasn't about you at all." A long silence settled. Everett tried to push the idea aside, but it clung to him. "She's a 9-year-old girl. Who would target her? That's what we need to find out." Everett stared at the screen, numbers scrolling, windows blinking open and shut, yet none of it looked like simple malfunction. Something intentional breathed beneath the surface. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Elena's name appeared. He answered immediately. "Is everything all right?" "Elena," Carson mouthed, bracing himself. Her breath trembled through the speaker. "Everett, Arya's school just called. There was a man outside the fence asking children questions. The staff approached him, and he left before security arrived." Everett's grip tightened. "Was he asking for Arya?" "They're not sure," Elena whispered. "But he described a girl with dark hair, around her age." He closed his eyes briefly. "I'm coming." "Everett," her voice broke, "please hurry." When the call ended, he grabbed his coat without thinking. Carson stood and slung his bag over his shoulder. "I'm going with you." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Carson interrupted firmly. "Whatever this is, it just escalated." They headed for the elevator, the hum of the city rising from below, as if the streets themselves sensed the shift in the air. Everett's heartbeat thudded louder with each descending floor. He wasn't used to fear, not the personal kind. Business threats were familiar, predictable, solvable. But the idea of a stranger looking for Arya, that lodged something sharp and unwelcome in his chest. Outside, the winter wind cut through the morning like a warning. Everett unlocked the car, but before getting in, he paused, staring across the skyline toward the river. Carson watched him. "You all right?" "No." Everett's voice was low. "Because I think we're running out of time." And somewhere deep inside, he sensed a truth he didn't want to name. Whatever shadow had brushed Arya's life, it had noticed her now. And shadows, once they took interest, rarely stepped back on their own. The drive to Arya's school took only minutes, but to Everett it felt longer than any commute he'd taken in years. When they arrived, the usual morning brightness felt muted. A patrol car sat beside the gate, lights off, but presence unmistakable. Elena and Mateo stood near the fence. Arya clung to her backpack, her anxious eyes scanning for Everett. Then she hurried toward him, relief softening her small face. "You came," she whispered. "Of course," he said, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her fingers tightened around the strap. Elena stepped forward, voice trembling. "A man was outside the gate this morning. Said he was looking for a lost dog, but then he described a girl with dark hair. When staff questioned him, he left." "And?" Arya touched the star, stitched on her jacket. "He said a girl who likes stars." Everett's stomach tightened. "You did exactly the right thing by staying away." Mateo's tone was sharp with fear. "Is this connected to the tablet?" Everett didn't sugarcoat it. It might be, and this wasn't random. Carson returned from speaking with the officer. They'll pull camera footage, but Everett, someone knew what they were looking for. Arya tugged gently at Everett's sleeve. Was he looking for me because of the message? Everett's voice softened. What matters is that we're going to keep you safe. Elena wrapped an arm around her daughter. We're taking her home. Mateo hesitated. But is home safe? For now, yes, Everett said. But I want to set up extra protection. Door sensors, monitored lines, a driver for school. Nothing invasive, just safe. Mateo's pride flickered, but fear for his daughter overpowered it. Do it, he said. As Arya climbed into the car, she looked back at Everett. Are you scared? A little, he admitted. Because you matter. She reached out and squeezed his hand. I'm glad you came. The car pulled away. Everett watched it disappear down the quiet street. Carson stood beside him. This isn't just tech trouble anymore. No, Everett said quietly. Someone made their first move today. Across the street, a dark SUV flashed its headlights once before, sliding into traffic and vanishing. Was he looking for me because of the message? Everett's voice softened. What matters is that we're going to keep you safe. Elena wrapped an arm around her daughter. We're taking her home. Mateo hesitated. But is home safe? For now, yes, Everett said. But I want to set up extra protection. Door sensors, monitored lines, a driver for school. Nothing invasive, just safe. Mateo's pride flickered, but fear for his daughter overpowered it. Do it, he said. We can't protect them from the sidelines. Not anymore. I know, Everett murmured. But I also can't drag them into a world they never chose. He turned slightly, watching the data from Arya's old tablet scroll across the monitor. Carson had isolated fragments of code. Clean, elegant, unmistakably intentional. Someone was watching, Carson said quietly. And not just her patterns. They were probing connections, checking what devices talk to what, mapping proximity. Everett's chest tightened. So they weren't after me. They were after whoever the tablet belonged to, Carson said. Which means Arya wasn't a coincidence. That truth settled heavy between them. Everett leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling as though answers might be hidden in the soft glow of the recessed lights. I keep asking myself why, he said. Why a little girl? Why that device? What could they possibly want from her? Carson stopped pacing. Maybe it's not her. Maybe it's the people around her. Mateo works long hours. Elena's at the diner. Kids are easy to watch without raising suspicion. But why Arya? Everett insisted. She's the one who found the message, Carson replied simply. A knock broke the tension. Before Everett could respond, Elena stepped in, still wearing her work uniform from the diner, hands trembling as she clutched her coat. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't know where else to go. Everett stood at once. You're always welcome here. Is Arya all right? She is, Elena said, though her voice wavered. She's at home drawing, but something happened. Carson exchanged a glance with Everett. Elena stepped farther into the room, her eyes clouded with a fear that seemed to age her by years.
This was taped to our door when we got home.
She handed Everett a small envelope plain, unmarked. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printed image. His pulse stilled. It was a photograph of Arya and Elena walking home weeks ago, taken from behind, as though someone had watched them from a distance. A message was printed at the bottom in small, precise letters. She shouldn't have seen it. Elena's breath hitched. I'm scared, Everett. I've never felt like this. I don't understand what they want, and I don't know how to protect her. Everett held the photo gently, though his own hands had begun to shake, not with fear, but with a controlled, dangerous calm. We're going to fix this, he said steadily. I promise you. Elena swallowed hard. How? I can't even sleep without checking every window. For now, Everett said softly. Let's start with getting you and your family somewhere safe. Carson crossed his arms. And then we find whoever's behind this. Elena looked from one man to the other, 2 lives far removed from her own. Yet suddenly, the only people standing between her daughter and the unknown. I don't know how we ended up in the middle of your world, she whispered. Everett shook his head. No, you didn't end up in mine. Someone brought danger to yours. And for the first time since this began, a quiet certainty formed in his chest. This was no longer about a message in a tablet or a stranger at a school gate. Someone had a plan, and Arya was now part of it. Everett guided Elena into a chair while Carson locked the office door. The city outside glowed with early evening lights, but the room felt closed-off quiet in a way that made every breath heavier. Elena clutched her coat. "I found this on our door," she whispered. Everett opened the unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photo. Elena and Arya walking home weeks earlier, taken from behind without their knowledge. At the bottom, printed in sharp letters. She shouldn't have seen it. Everett felt something cold settle in his chest. "You were right to come here," he said. "And she's safe for now." Elena's voice cracked. "What do they want from us?" "We're nobody." Carson studied the picture. "This message isn't random. Somebody wanted to scare you into silence." "But why?" Elena insisted. "She's just a little girl." Everett sat forward, choosing his words gently. "Arya stumbled onto something someone wanted hidden. That makes her a witness, even if she doesn't understand what she saw." Elena covered her mouth. "Should we pull her out of school?" "Not yet," Everett said. "It could make things worse. We'll move you to a safe place first." Her resolve finally broke. She nodded. "All right, we'll go." Carson suddenly straightened, eyes locked on his laptop. "Everett, look at this." A new alert pulsed across the screen. The same digital signature that touched Arya's tablet had just appeared again, but this time it wasn't in Jersey City. It wasn't outside a school. It came from inside Everett's own building. Carson's voice dropped. "They're already here." Everett felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't a distant threat anymore. Whoever was watching Arya, whoever sent that message, had just stepped into his world. The penthouse felt tense the rest of the afternoon. Carson worked through layers of code from Arya's old tablet, while Everett arranged security and transport for the Solis family. The city darkened outside, but neither man looked up from what now felt like a race against time. When Everett rejoined the family in the seating area, he found Arya curled under a blanket, quietly drawing. He asked gently to see her picture. She turned it around. A small house, a bright sun, and a dark figure near the trees. Everett's breath caught. "Who is that, sweetheart?" Arya answered without fear, just honesty. "He's been in my dreams. Last night he was closer." Elena's eyes filled. "She's been having nightmares since the tablet thing started." Everett crouched beside Arya. "Can you tell me what he looks like?" "Tall," she whispered. "Wearing something dark. No face." Carson looked at Everett, troubled. "Kids draw what they remember." Everett rose. "We leave now." They gathered quickly, the guards waiting at the elevator. Just before the doors shut, Arya tugged Everett's sleeve. "I need to tell you something." From the tablet. He knelt again. "I'm listening." Her voice dropped to a fragile whisper. It said, "I found one." The world seemed to still around them. Everett held her gaze. "You're safe now. You did the right thing." But deep inside, he knew this wasn't just a threat. Someone was labeling children, and Arya had been the first. The elevator doors slid open into the lobby, warm lights glowing against the polished marble floors. But Everett sensed the change immediately, an off note in a familiar melody. The space felt too quiet, too still, as if someone had turned down the volume on the entire building. He guided Elena, Mateo, and Arya toward the private exit, where a trusted driver waited. Arya hesitated as she stepped outside into the winter air, drawing her coat tighter around her shoulders. "Will you come after us?" she asked softly. Everett knelt beside her. "Yes, I won't be far behind." She nodded, reassured, though her small fingers lingered on his sleeve for a moment before she climbed into the car. Mateo followed, his jaw tight. Elena gave Everett one last look of unspoken gratitude and fear. The door closed, and the car pulled away into the early evening traffic, red taillights fading into rows of headlights and city haze. Carson exhaled beside him. "At least they're safe for now." "Safe for now," Everett repeated quietly. When they stepped back inside, the lobby felt different. Everett approached the front desk, expecting to see Daniel, the concierge who had worked there for years. Instead, a stranger stood behind the counter, head lowered over a clipboard. Everett slowed. "Where's Daniel tonight?" The man looked up with a calm, unreadable expression. "Shift change." Carson frowned. "There is no shift change at this hour." Daniel's schedule hasn't changed in 3 years. The man offered a small, almost polite smile. Some schedules change without notice. Everett's instincts sharpened. Something was very wrong. Before he could ask another question, the man reached under the counter not quickly, not threateningly, and slid a small white card toward him. No name, no logo, just 4 printed words. We know what she saw. The message hit like a gust of cold air. Everett didn't touch the card right away. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. The man held his gaze with unsettling calm. Someone delivering a message. Nothing more. Carson took a step forward. "You need to leave. Now." But the man didn't flinch.
You're doing a noble thing, Mr. Caldwell, protecting a child, but others are looking too, and they won't be as polite as I am.
Everett's voice dropped, steady and dangerous. "Stay away from that family. I'm not the one you should worry about," the man replied, slipping on a coat. "This has already moved past warnings." He walked toward the side door, pushed it open, and disappeared into the winter night as cleanly as he had appeared. No rush, no fear, no trace. Carson broke the silence. He was bluffing. He had to be. Everett lifted the card, feeling the weight of 4 simple words. "No," he said quietly. This wasn't a bluff. Carson swallowed. "So what do we do now?" Everett stared at the darkened doorway, where the man had vanished, the faint reflection of city lights gleaming across the marble floors. "Now," Everett said, voice low and set, "we find out exactly what Arya saw before. Whoever's hunting her makes their next move." The lobby felt colder than the night outside, and Everett understood that the real danger had just stepped out of the shadows. In the quiet after everything settled, it became clear that this story was never just about danger or shadows. It was about how one frightened child and one wounded man helped each other find a way back to the light. And in the stillness of that final evening, when Arya finally slept without fear and Everett looked out over the city with a softer heart than he'd had in years, you could almost feel the world exhale. Sometimes healing arrives without noise, like a porch light glowing at dusk, guiding someone home without asking for anything in return. The lesson is simple, yet it carries the weight of a lifetime. Love, redemption, and the courage to build a new home can change a life far more than wealth or power ever could. Kindness, especially the quiet kind, can reshape fate. Everyone deserves to be loved, to belong, and to be given a chance to shine. And happiness often finds us only when we start living for someone other than ourselves. It's a truth many listeners know well. Just like the warm smell of a family dinner or the way a familiar hymn drifts through an old church on Sunday morning, the smallest acts of goodness can carry us through the darkest roads. So take a moment, dear listener, let this story sit with you. If it touched your heart, press 1 the comments. If you feel it could be better or wish to share a thought, press 0. And if this tale brought you even a little comfort tonight, feel free to stay and join us for the next one.